Neil, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a few words about your current role and what are you up to?
Sure. So currently I'm a fractional CMO at a cybersecurity company. They are specialized in identity and access management,
Hmm.
and they are B2B and they provide advisory, integration, and managed services.
I understand. And then within that role, what kind of functions roll up to you?
Marketing. So under marketing, we got events and partner marketing, field marketing. We're doing digital brand, and the different channels, of course, things like PR, um, social media,
Hmm.
and the main assets and touch points such as the website, and and because it is a B2B sales organization, so sales enablement, sales support, providing the cloud cover
Hmm.
for the sales folks in terms of awareness, messaging, materials, and things like that.
I understand. I understand. And so that kind of paints the data point on the arc of your career. But how did you get in this space? What was the first door that you knocked on?
In terms of cybersecurity,
Hmm.
um, so you know, I've had a pretty nonlinear career. I've been in different industries. I've been a freelancer. I've been a consultant. I've been an executive. And earlier days, I'd say about 15 years ago, I was introduced to the founder CEO of this current company. So at that point, I was doing small, marketing projects with them, some design work, website redesigns, campaigns, and things like that. And that was my first exposure to this industry and also identity access management in particular. And I was like, wow, this is complex. There's a lot to it, a lot to learn about it. Um, and so throughout the years, as my career has unfolded, I have worked with this organization multiple times, including a major rebrand, several campaigns.
Hmm.
And that has now, I've gone from an outsider to an insider. So I went from what you call a mercenary to a missionary, and I'm more integrated with the organization, helping build out the marketing functions. And so throughout that whole journey, I got exposed to, cybersecurity as a whole and as a practice and as an industry, and then as a niche, like more into the identity space.
I understand. I understand. Well, there is this big debate that's going on. Some people say you have to be really technical. You have to understand, well, not maybe not writing code, but you really need to understand the nuts and bolts so that you can convey this to your potential clients. Other people say, well, you really, it's nice to have, but you really need to be able to tell a story and tell it in a different way, not in a better way, so you're standing out above the noise. It sounds like you were involved in so many different projects along the way. What's your take on this? Do you think it's a hard requirement to become technical, even if maybe someone is not right off the bat? It just the reason I'm asking is that this content is viewed a lot by maybe some of the junior professionals who are just starting on their journey, or maybe even
Right.
more upstream of that, who are just trying to figure out. They see a space that's growing, but they're maybe hesitant to dip their toe. What's your take on that, technical or not?
So I think there's going to be a soft line in terms of a knowledge that a marketer has versus the technical experts. And I
Mhm.
think there's a hard line in terms of what the technical experts provide versus what a marketer provides.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, the more you know about a solution or a product, how it works, the better you can craft a story around it. So I think it's both. However, you may need to, if you're first delving into cybersecurity or any technical field, um, and if you're junior and you're trying to build your career, you need to learn how to learn because I think that's the most important, one of the most important attributes or skill sets as a marketer.
Mhm.
Um, because chances are you're not going to be only in one industry. And even if you do enter cybersecurity, it's such a big field and there's so many different aspects to it. And so I think whether you're a senior executive and you're just getting into cybersecurity, or you're a junior marketer and you want to build your career into cybersecurity, you should take a pathway of learning, what happens on the technical side. Now, again, you don't need to write code, I don't think, unless you're passionate about it. But how it works, why it's being offered, understanding the organization that goes behind it. If it's a managed service, like assembling the team and orchestrating that, versus, an integration, for example, or just an advisory, knowing the nuts and bolts a little bit helps you understand why it's differentiated from other providers. And, differentiation in marketing isn't always about the brand. It isn't always about the story. It could be also about the process, and if you're B2B, finding differentiation can be very difficult. It's very relationship built, but if you're organized in a way to offer a service that is very unique, and you have a unique talent pool, and you have unique training within the organization around the service, those are all great points to communicate externally. So I think you need to get deeper than just tell me the 3 facts and 3 value, benefit statements, and we're going to craft and make a nice story about it. I think a smart marketer will go a little bit deeper.
Interesting. It almost sounds like if you're curious enough, you will get technical enough down the line. But so it's not a requirement right off the bat, but if to be successful, you cannot not be curious, because the field itself is changing, not just the marketing field, but also cybersecurity space in itself. So it's almost being incessantly curious is more of a prerequisite than anything, because it'll enable you to get where you need to get in terms of being up to speed as far as the technology is concerned. That's very interesting. So you mentioned some of the things that you're responsible for internally. It seems marketing in itself and B2B aspect of it's changing. It's changing, and sometimes there are themes that are playing out, and certain things, certain ideas capture probably the zeitgeist at a time, and it sounds like they come in waves. At some point, it was all about inbound. So HubSpot pioneered this concept of inbound, and everyone was rushing to build inbound teams. Then it was, for a while, it was large-scale conferences like RSA or Black Hat or Gartner. Then with COVID, that went away, and everyone rushed into virtual roundtables and webinars and whatnot. So it seems like those things come in waves. But what in reality, what probably is happening is that marketing in B2B sense of it, it's usually a set of tools, and some tools may be more used than others. So in your toolbox, what tools you're using, what tools performing for you right now?
So we do use HubSpot, and do a lot of our campaign management through it. We have integrations with Salesforce, and Salesforce is where our sales team lives primarily, and then we have enrichment tools as well. As for outreach, using 6 Sense, Zoom Info, and so the integration of these tools and how they work, that's a project in itself, and ensuring that flow of information is passed through correctly. Salesforce is kind of for us where essentially where marketing meets sales, and where qualified leads are being tracked and handed off. But we're using tools like HubSpot for outreach, and like for email campaigns and things like that.
I understand. Well, actually, I meant a little bit more. If you look at the customer journey from not ready to buy, maybe upstream, maybe they're problem aware, or vendor landscape aware, or solution aware, to the point where they're ready to engage with sales, ready to do proof of concept, ready to become a client, ready to become ambassador. So it's a kind of a spectrum of those different steps. And to your point, marketing meets sales somewhere in the middle, where this kind of handoff occurs. So I was wondering more about what channels, if you wish, produce results for you more in the upstream. Is it more conferences? Is it more content syndication? And is it more, I know a lot of companies run campaigns on LinkedIn, and it's hugely expensive, but hugely effective for some organizations. I was wondering, kind of along those lines, what channels are performing for you?
Yeah, so exactly what you mentioned. Events and conferences are large for us, and um, it's not only prospecting, but it's also enriching our existing relationships, which lead to additional business, from existing clients. But it's also our vendor relations, our the technical vendors that we have partnered with. We do campaigns with them. We have we're have a high cadence with them. So it is a relationship business. You should think about your relationships in 360 degrees. And so that's our partner channels are very important to us because recommendations come from them. We have analyst relations as well. You got the Gartners, and so through those channels, it's high quality leads, it's conversations, that come in. And then yes, we have campaigns on LinkedIn. It's a primary channel for that. And we have, activities SEO and our blog. So we do a lot of content marketing through that as well. And now we're building out more around account-based marketing and email
Yeah,
to supplement all of that.
I understand. I understand. Well, I brought up the this top of the funnel, not top of the funnel, the early stage steps of the customer journey. What a lot of people, I'm hearing more and more this concept of dark funnels, meaning in the past, you could track really all the steps kind of along the way. The attribution was fairly straightforward. It appears that a lot of this communication earlier on happens maybe in a private Slack, maybe over coffee with a colleague, maybe as a sidebar conversation at RSA or Black Hat, something that's not really, there is no attribution, there is no involvement of any kind of third-party tracking tool. Often as a vendor, you don't know this conversation is happening, you're not privy to it, there's no way for you to track it, there's no way for even to contribute. It's a peer asking a peer for feedback or for advice, and the vendor's name comes up, but all the vendor sees is that person typing the name in the Google. So, hence Google gets the attribution, we need to invest more in Google AdWords, which is really not what has happened, but that's what we see. And there's
Mhm.
this huge debate about, well, we really need to be more granular in attribution, but then anything that's multi-touch and spread over time, it becomes a guessing game, right? So what was the starting point? Was the starting point when the CISO went past your booth at RSA, didn't engage in conversation, but saw the brand, and then 3 months later had a conversation with a colleague over coffee, and then saw a webinar? Like, which of the steps was primarily responsible for them then going to your website and scheduling a demo? And
Yeah.
spread out over time, like if there's perishability of insight, something that happened yesterday, I would argue it has more validity in terms of what's going to happen down the line versus something that happened a year ago or 2 years ago. Sometimes some people don't even remember what was the first time. I don't remember what was the first time I saw Coca-Cola. Was it a friend drinking it, or is it an ad on TV? I have no idea. It's how do you think about that?
There's a good couple of thoughts there. So the funnel is almost a myth when you think about it in that context. We all have these pretty pictures of like awareness, intent, conversion, advocacy. And I think it's still important to consider that in certain tactical stages. But the reality is, and especially the climate that we've been in this year, in high inflation times, the fear of a looming recession that has never come, there is more of a maze as opposed to a funnel when it
Mm,
comes to the buyer decision making. You know, there's things like vendor selection, which vendor do we need, and doing that research could just be, not even the executive, it could be the director or the manager, just doing a bunch of Google searches, looking on social and talking to people and informing, the C-level or the director on, which vendor to go with. And then, what kind of due diligence do they do at that point? And that could be looking at the accolades, looking at their case studies, that could be talking to analysts. And then what's we're seeing a lot more in B2B, and hopefully it's starting to improve a little bit, is the consensus, a decision making when it used to be a singular budget holder. If you're a CISO or a CTO, CMO, most the chances are you have autonomy over your thinking, and your budgets, Now it's we don't know what's going to happen in the next quarter. Our own sales have softened. We have to reforecast. So I have to speak with the CFO and the CEO. And now it goes back to a consensus, within the leadership team on, do we buy this service or not? So there's a lot more complexity into that buyer decision making process. And then budgets come in, and then looking at RFPs potentially, and this is after the awareness piece. This is now we're kind of starting to engage with somebody, but just that little leg of the journey alone has become so complicated and so much more complex. And now you're selling to a decision maker that needs the buy-in of multiple decision makers on the highest level. I've had experience selling up to a board, in certain companies, right? So I think that needs to be considered in your pitch, and when you're actually having these conversations. How can you enable the person that you're pitching to have better better decision making power within the organization? And
do you
so sorry.
go ahead.
The other thought I was gonna say is because when we look at digital, we try to really emphasize attribution and where the leads come from, how were they made aware, how were they considering us, and then where did they convert. But I feel, especially with what you just mentioned, there needs to be a mechanism in house when you're onboarding a client to ask them, to find out how they heard about you, to find out what drove that decision, just like a simple way and a systemized way of doing that internally, and see if it matches some of your external activities or not. Because that could be a qualitative way of adding a new dimension. No one knows better than the client. Even if they can't remember the first time they saw Coke, I'm pretty sure their more recent decision to buy a Coke is pretty fresh in their mind, right? Um, so yeah, anyways, I think there's different ways to look at it. I think there's different ways we can query it that's not so stuck on the quantitative side.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And this form, the self-attribution form, it cannot be a drop down box. It needs to be a free form.
Yeah, or a conversation.
Because you'd be surprised. It's like you cannot. You may know like what some of the likely channels are, but you can never. It's almost always better to leave it free form, so people just type in whatever comes to mind. And but on the first one, kind of the follow-up question. So this scenario where it's no longer kind of one decision maker on budget, but it's a lot of different influencers or budget holders involved, CFO, CEO, board, etc. Does it translate to longer sales cycles?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
less visibility into the account? And kind of a follow-on question to that, would that make ABM kind of a more compelling and necessary strategy where you're not talking to one champion, but you're kind of trying to address information needs of multiple decision makers within the organization?
Yeah. So to answer your first question there, and the point there, yeah, the sales cycle have significantly increased from my own experience, but also anecdotal experience talking to other people and looking online. In the reason, again, with all of that happening internally, you don't get a hard no. You get this really drawn out, yes, but got to do this now. Yes, but we got to validate this now. Or we're going to get back to you. We haven't talked about this yet. And things that would take only weeks where you do a follow-up conversation the following week, it ends up being multiple weeks or a month. So the sales cycles have drawn out quite a bit in B2B, but we're seeing signs of it shortening again.
Which
And
was my
hopefully
next question. Do you think it's a secular trend, or do you think it just basically based on the expectations of a recession that, to your point, never came, and people are becoming more optimistic and have more visibility in how their financials is going to look like in 2024, so they're loosening the purse strings a little bit? But
yeah, so I'm not an economist at all, but I do think we tend to adjust. So there's positive signs of inflation dropping in the US and Canada and other parts of the world. Doesn't mean things get less expensive. It just means to stop getting more expensive, right? So I think there's a thing of an adjustment. But I think hearing signs of that, brings a little bit of validity and we got through the worst of it, and if inflation's dropping, there's no real recession here yet. I think we can start investing in these activities again. It remains to be seen. We've gone, as we've gone through some crazy market dynamics over the last couple of years, pandemics, wars, the high inflation, and rapid growth of certain technologies like generative AI. So there's a lot of different dynamics happening all at once, and I think I would just say it. I hate to be an economist right now because you just kind of like the weatherman scenario. You're just gonna take guesses here.
uh, yeah, coin flipping exercise a lot of it, because I mean a lot of factors, and a lot of them some of them maybe would cancel out each other, but others would amplify. But certainly it seems we're in a little bit better space from the economic standpoint, with, to your point, inflation subsiding, and at the very least it looks like the interest rates hopefully are going to go on increasing. You mentioned conferences, just kind of switching gears a little bit. Are you more an RSA fan, or Black Hat, or Gartner, or maybe all the above?
Well, we do very industry specific ones. So Gartner's a big one. Identiverse is another one. So they are quite specific to identity, or there may be larger cyber ones. And we like to, we invest in spaces or booths. We invest in activities, the smaller events and dinners and things like that. And then we have a lot of thought leaders in the organization, which to me is awesome, as a marketer. And they can speak to certain topics and be on panels and things like that. Right. So and then we have salespeople on the ground, of course, and engaging. So there's a multi-pronged kind of approach there.
Which makes a lot of sense, because thought leadership, it's really addressing the needs of people who are not ready to buy, not ready to engage with the sales executives, but it's more about educating and evangelism and thought leadership. So it makes a lot of sense. I know we'll come up on time a little bit, Neel. So last question. Imagine you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future, and 12 months from now, B2B marketers in general and cybersecurity marketing executives in particular will be obsessed about, concerned about, excited about what 2-3 themes or technologies that may or may not be present today, or maybe are just emerging. What would those be? What will be the headline of what will be in the headlines for CMOs?
In a year from now, if most of them haven't changed jobs, because CMOs have the shortest tenure of any C-level, it typically lasts about a year and a half. Look, it's easy to say AI because it's peak hype cycle right now with generative AI. Although, I've done a lot of work in AI over the last decade or so, and the revolution's been happening for a while. But now that it's accessible, It's way more front of mind, and there's a lot of hype going around it. I do think it is a paradigm shift. We are using different tools around ChatGPT and generative AI. So I think what's going to happen as a marketer, it's going to go down to the age-old principles of what good marketing is, and positioning is going to get more and more important. And by positioning, I mean knowing what you are, why you matter, and why you're differentiated. The reason for that is because now we all have access to these tools that can generate content at scale, you know, and so it creates, if you look at the stack of innovation, you have things like the networks, like 5G, those continue to improve. They continue to improve access and bandwidth. Our devices continue to improve. We're able to share more and do more things through our devices, more connectivity. The social media platforms continue to expand at higher rates. And then you layer in generative AI on top of that. It's just an explosion of content. There's going to be a lot of bad content and a lot of content that's going to look the same. And there's going to be some cool stuff. So that being said, you're on one side of that as a marketer and a marketing team generating your content, you're excited about it. And then you're on the other side trying to swim through all the sea of other crap that's out there. Now, if you stick back to your principles of positioning and differentiation, that needs to cut through the noise as you're creating your content so you can be found. And of course, money helps you jump the line. Your advertising still needs to be compelling. The one thing we noticed when you look back a little bit and you look at stock photos, right? When stock photography became a thing, stock imagery and stock graphics and all of that, you just saw a lot of companies trying to look the same, boardroom image of one guy pointing at a computer, somebody pointing at a whiteboard, drinking a coffee. Like, you just saw the same stuff over and over. And I think stock imagery has done wonders to like enable companies and creatives, but then the ones that took those and used them sparsely and fillers and created more original creative around their brand do better. And now we're going to see the same thing with generative AI. You can already see Midjourney kind of has a brand to it. You can kind of see that DALL-E content kind of looks the same. So utilizing these tools, and they're amazing tools and I love them, but ensure you have your own guardrails around your differentiators and your unique value proposition, and utilize those tools in conjunction with your brand identity to really have a different differentiation in the market. So I think in 12 months from now, CMOs are going to be faced with this sea of content and how to differentiate through it. How do you cut through it? So I think that's a challenge they're going to have to deal with. In addition to that, I think we're going to just continue to see now cybersecurity marketers. The good ones, I think, are going to be very technically savvy, because as a marketer, you need to understand, just for any company, while creativity is very important, brand strategy is very important, you're very data driven and you have all your tools and your technologies. And sometimes you're just pasting together spreadsheets and it's still, as long as you're getting the insights. So again, with AI, and the more it becomes accessible and more it solidifies, we're getting more and more excited about the tool set that we're working with. But now you layer in cybersecurity, and going back to our first point of our topics we spoke about today, and getting smarter about, what your cybersecurity offering is, getting smarter about the industry, like knowing, for example, the massive job vacancies in cybersecurity, and how does this industry that you're in evolve to kind of put guardrails around the other industry that's taking off right now. So I think the right marketers that are very invested in this will be very smart when it comes to technology and their breadth of understanding technology, because they're gonna kind of have to.
Certainly. Well, that means that we'll have to meet again in 12 months and see which of those forecasts would come to fruition. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again. Neel, thank you so much for your time. This was this was lots of fun. This was very interesting and insightful conversation. What's the best way for people to find you? What's the best way to connect?
Sure. Neelsingh.com. So my name is spelled NEELSINGH.com. That's my website. And you can also search for me on LinkedIn with Neel Singh.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Misha. Take care.